Hello friends, in this video lecture, we will try to understand comparison between SNMP V1, V2 and V3. That means comparison between Simple Network Management Protocol version 1, version 2 and version 3. As shown in the figure, this is nothing but SNMP system overview. We can say that it is SNMP V1 basic architecture. As we can easily observe, there is one manager application and one agent application. Manager contains MDB, that is management database. That means every information can get easily stored inside this particular MDB. And agent contains MIB, that is management information base. Means related to agent, every information is stored inside the MIB. Now they will try to communicate with each other with the help of few messages. That means events. Events are nothing but what? Generation of messages. As shown, manager will start the communication. So he will try to send the first message to the agent. Again manager will try to send something. Again he will try to send something. Then agent will try to respond with some messages. So these are nothing but what? Generation of events, that means generation of messages, which are very much important for making the communication. Establishment of communication can be done with the help of transmission of different type of messages, and with the help of the generation of different type of messages, there are few types of SNMP, that are nothing but SNMP V1, SNMP V2 and SNMP V3. This particular architecture is related with SNMP V1. In this SNMP UDP, that means user datagram protocol, IP, internet protocol, data link control layer, DLC and physical layer. These are the 5 layers who will take the active participation to make the communication successful. So now to understand or to compare the different versions, we have to first understand the different system overview and the messages generated in the different versions of SNMP. So let us try to understand them with the help of theory. For our more convenient, I will try to give the numbers to these messages. So 1, 2, 3, the first 3 messages are generated by manager, and 4th and 5th, these are the messages which are generated by the agent side. The given architecture, that means what we have seen about the SNMP V1, establishes the path between manager application process and agent application process via transport function protocol such as SNMP, UDP, IP, DLC and physical layer. The 3 application layers, that are session, presentation and application, are integrated in the SNMP process. The communication of management information among the management entities is realized through the exchange of the 5 protocols. So what are these 5 protocols? That are nothing but SNMP, UDP, IP, after that DLC and physical layer. Protocol means what? Rules and regulations to make your communication much more successful. So for the SNMP, whatever the number of protocols, that means rules and regulations, we try to utilize, that are nothing but these 5. And hence in the given architecture, that means in the system overview of SNMP, we try to use this 5 protocol combination as a layer architecture for transmit or receive the different type of messages. Now exactly what kind of messages they are going to transmit or exchange in between them, that we have to understand. 3 of the messages, that are nothing but what? Get request, get next request and set request, are initiated by the manager process. That means the first 3 numbers we have given for the manager process, and the agent process will try to receive the first 3 numbers, and then agent will try to send the next 2. So what are these 3 messages? 1, 2 and 3 in SNMP V1. The first one is get request, the next one is get next request and the last one is set request. Other are get response and traps, which are generated by the agent process. That means the fourth number and the fifth number, these are the messages which are transmitted by the agent and received by the manager. So what are these fourth and fifth number of messages? That are nothing but get response and traps. Message generation is called as event. So what we can say, in the SNMP V1, total 5 events are generated in the SNMP version 1. Now we have to understand the function of each and every message. The first one, that is nothing but get request. The spelling should be GET. This message is generated by the management process requesting the value of an object. So whenever the manager requires something from agent, then he must have to request first to the agent, and what he will request, the value of an object, and the value should be the scalar variable. The next one, that is the get next request, is very similar to get request. In many situations, an object may have the multiple values, and by that time we have to use the get next request. Next means what? Suppose this is the first object O1, then this is the O2 and O3. But in the object 1, if there are many sub objects are present, let's say PQR, having some numbers, scalar variables, then the manager will request for O1 with the help of get request. But in the get request, only he will get the first value. If he want the next values, then what he has to do, he has to send get next request, so that he can get the multiple object instances, that means the multiple values. After that, the third one is nothing but what? Set request. Set request is generated by the management process to initialize or to reset the value. That means if any value agent is going to change or manager wants to change it, then the meaning is he has to reset the value. So such kind of requests are generated with the help of the message generation, which are known as set requests. So total number of 3 requests generated by the management process in the SNMP version 1, and that are nothing but get request, get next request and set request. After that, get response and traps. These are the two things or the events which are generated by the agent process. So what it means by get response? When the get response message is generated by an agent process, but it is generated only on the receipt of get request, get next request or set request. That means whenever manager will send some request to the agent, then only agent will respond. Otherwise, the get response will not generated. So manager must have to start the communication with the help of any one of these 3 messages, and then agent will try to respond them. So get response process involves filling of the values requested object with any success or error message related with the response. So manager will do what? Manager means sender. Hence I am trying to represent it with the help of the character S, or you can use the character M over here. So manager or sender will send what kind of request? Value of an object, and hence in the response, in the process of response, agent will try to fill that particular value. So the output of the get response is again the scalar quantity of the object value. After this, along with the get response, traps are also generated by the agent process. The other message that are generated by the agent are known as the traps. They are unsolicited. Now, meaning of the unsolicited means unwanted. Messenger generated or messages generated by the agent process without an event arriving from the manager process. Now, manager is able to transmit the 3 messages. What are that? Get request, get next request and set request to the agent. With the help of generation of any one message or arriving of any one message, then only agent will try to respond. with the help of get response. But along with get response, some messages are generated which may be unsolicited, that means which may be unwanted, and that are nothing but traps. So for the generation of traps, as they are unwanted messages, no any event or no any request should be sent by the manager. So these are automatically generated message along with the get response. So SNMP Manager, which is located in the NMS, has a database that pulls the managed object for the management data. Traps occurs when the agent observes the occurrence of the preset parameter in the agent model. Traps are nothing but, I will try to give you one example, that always after the completion of our regular call, we are getting some messages or notifications from that particular company of which SIM we are going to use. So in that they may send us the notification regarding the time, how much amount of time we have invested for a particular call. After that they can also send us the information about the money. Money means about our recharge, how much money we have invested for that call and how much remains. Also, along with that, many times after observing or after using the YouTube or internet indirectly, we are getting the notification about the database, how much data space we have occupied and how much we left. So these are nothing but what notifications. Many times these are useful for us, or many times we don't require such kind of notifications. So these such kind of messages are generated without any request from our side. They are generated automatically. So notifications are many times known as traps. So in that particular manner, again the agent try to respond some traps along with the get response, and that may be unsolicited or many times that may be useful. So what is the conclusion? We have observed now in the SNMP V1, total 5 messages are generated, and 3 from the manager side and 2 from the agent side. Now we have to understand SNMP V2. SNMP V2 architecture is very similar to that of SNMP V1, but there are addition of 2 messages which are generated by the agent or the manager side. So let us try to understand what are that messages and who is responsible to generate them. An inform request, this is the name of the message, which is generated by a manager application and transmitted to another manager application. So SNMP V2 architecture is usually used to make or establish the communication between the multiple manager. Suppose this is the manager 1, this is the manager 2, and this is the agent 1. Then there will be the communication in between manager to manager also, and manager to agent also. So this is nothing but the indirectly the scenario of the SNMP V2. So this will be the layers along with which they will try to establish or they will try to make some communication. So if the manager, multiple manager wants to establish a communication between them, then they have to generate inform message and which will be bidirectional. This is the change in the directionality in the event generation, and also the change in between the sender and receiver replacement. So SNMP V2 is the enhancement of SNMP V1 in which we can establish the communication between the multiple manager, and due to this enhancement in the architecture, there will be the lead of the first event that is known as the inform request. So an inform request message is generated by a manager application and transmitted to other manager application. Receiving a manager application response with a response message, this set of communication message is a powerful enhancement in the SNMP V2 because it makes to NMS interoperable. NMS means what? Network management system, or indirectly this is nothing but manager. So the communication establishment between the multiple manager can be done with the help of SNMP V2 architecture, and for that purpose we must have to understand or use inform request which is bidirectional. This is very much important, and that can be sent in between only manager to manager. After that there is one more request or more event. It is known as get bulk request. Again, it is generated by the manager application. Get bulk request. The name itself indicates that bulk means huge. Large amount of data you can send or transfer in between or exchange in between the multiple manager. It is used to transfer the large amount of data from agent to manager, and SNMP V2 trap event is also known as trap version 1, and it is generated and transmitted by the agent process. Now try to understand get bulk request is the another event which is generated in the SNMP V2, and this can be used in between manager and agent. So this particular get bulk request is the request initiated by the manager and received by the agent. Along with the reception of this particular message, agent will try to send the large amount of data to the manager, and hence whenever you require a huge amount of data, then SNMP V2 is the enhancement of the SNMP V1 which will try to produce or which will try to exchange the huge amount of data from agent to manager. And as the request is initiated by the manager, hence in the SNMP V2, 5 messages are initiated by the manager and 2 messages are initiated by the agent. So total number of events which are generated in the SNMP V2 architecture, that are nothing but 7. As we have already seen, the 5 number of events generated by the SNMP V1 and 7 number of messages or events generated by the SNMP V2. So this is the first main important comparison in between the architecture enhancement and the event generation in the two versions of SNMP, that are nothing but 5 and 7, and they are related to version 1 and version 2. Now in short, if we require to compare, then how can we state something about the SNMP V1? SNMP V1 was the first version of SNMP. Its goal of being an open standard protocol, it was found to be lacking in key areas for a certain application. It uses the smaller RTUs. RTUs means remote telemetry units. Commonly supports SNMP V1, and hence they are less advanced. Along with this, what we can add in this particular slide or in the answer which we have already discussed, that means what are the 5 messages generated by SNMP V1 or 5 events are generated by SNMP V1. We can name all those events, and we can also draw the architecture of SNMP V1 and we can explain it. Similarly, the features about SNMP V2. SNMP V2 was the second version of SNMP. Its key advantage over the previous version is the informed command, improved error handling. It also improved the set command, and it is more advanced than that of SNMP V1. And why it is more advanced than that of SNMP V1? Because of the 2 extra events are generated which are nothing but get inform request, and second one is get bulk request. So these are nothing but 2 different type of requests or the events which are generated in SNMP V2 than that of the SNMP V1, and because of which we can say that easily SNMP V2 is the enhancement of SNMP V1, because here we can communicate in between the multiple manager also, and along with the transmission of large amount of data. So we can easily say that SNMP V2 is more advanced than that of SNMP V1. And now, what about SNMP V3? There is a difference, lot of difference in between the architecture of SNMP V1, V2 and V3. Most probably we can say that SNMP V1 and V2 are much more similar in the architecture format, but SNMP V3 having a complete different architecture. As we can easily observe in a particular slide, there are 2 layers of SNMP V3 architecture. The first layer is the application layer and second is the SNMP engine, which is identified by SNMP engine ID. So what we have to explain in that, we can easily observe the block diagrams, and every block diagram is, that means every block is able to perform their own function. So in the application layer, there are many blocks and that are nothing but command generator, notification receiver, proxy forwarder, command responder, notification originator and other. And in the SNMP engine, there are the blocks which are nothing but dispatcher, message processing subsystem, security subsystem, access control subsystem, so on. Now we have to understand the function of every block. SNMP V3 was the third version of SNMP. Its primary feature is enhancement in security. The engine ID identifier in the SNMP V3 uniquely identifies each SNMP entity. The engine ID is also generate the key for authenticated messages. Try to understand SNMP V3 is developed for the security purpose with the help of providing the authentication of the messages. So what it means by security of the network? There are two main key words for providing the more security. One is nothing but authentication and second one is nothing but authorization. So with the help of these two things, we have to now understand how SNMP V3 is different than that of SNMP V1 and V2. Authentication is used to ensure that the traps are ready by only the intended recipients. That means authentication indirectly play a very important role for exchange of the data in between the manager and agent or indirectly in between the sender and receiver. Authenticated sender, authenticated receiver are nothing but the correct receiver and correct sender. That means message is going to exchange in between the manager and agent and they both are valid manager and agent. So the data which we try to transmit between them, the data passed to the valid sender and valid receiver. So data will become more secure. Secondly, authorization. Authorization means verification. Verification of data, verification of network elements again play an important role for providing the more security. And this can also known as the privacy. One more word is there that is nothing but encrypts. Privacy encrypts the payload of the SNMP message to ensure that it cannot be read by the unauthorized user. Unauthorized means non-valid user. So obviously our message is not going to read by the unvalid user and this is nothing but what providing the more security. But what it means by encryption? Encryption is nothing but conversion of one format into the other. So suppose our input is ABCD, then with the help of the process of encryption, you can change that particular thing into PQRS. So suppose any hacker try to observe your data, he will only observe PQRS. If you don't know how to decrypt that, then he cannot find out the original data is ABCD. So encryption again play a very important role for making your data more private or more secure. So these are the few things which are provided by SNMP V3 which are not provided in SNMP V1 and V2 and hence SNMP V3 is more advanced than that of the SNMP V2 which is again more advanced than that of the SNMP V1. So for the comparison process what we can say SNMP V1 is less secure, SNMP V2 is more secure than that of SNMP V1 and SNMP V3 is more secure than that of SNMP V1 as well as SNMP V2. And on the basis of this thing we have to elaborate architecture of V1, V2 and V3 and we have to set that how they are differ from each other in their function. So this is nothing but comparison between the different versions of SNMP. Thank you.